Thank you very much for joining us. Now, the fourth webinar in the series, where we're talking about customer success or client success, whichever way you like to see it. And I'm very pleased to be joined by Theresa Tan today. Theresa is one of the earliest adopters of TSIA's LAER model, which is the Land, Adopt, Expand, Renew model. When we implemented the whole LAER model to renew our clients and really focus on the client success lifecycle back in the company we both worked for called Dimension Data. Back in 2012, Theresa, going back a bit, she was the first PROCI, which is an acronym for Professional Plus Science put together, PROCI Certified Change Management Practitioner in Southeast Asia, and started our adoption and change management practice back then when we started the original deployment of large-scale endpoint technology to our clients across the region. And beyond our network and data center business, this was really a key area for growth, but it was something we had to really focus client success on. And it's a pleasure for me to introduce her today to talk through driving revenue through adoption. So, Theresa, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Bill. It's been a while actually. So today's topic is quite interesting. It is a client or customer success that we know, but at the same time, how it has come together with the adoption, change management. And today we can't even have a conversation around the room around artificial intelligence or AI without talking about change management. So it's very interesting how everything has come together. But to a lot of the vendors, let's say on the IT vendors part here, we're looking at, we are not unfamiliar with the customer success. So we have got client CSM, customer success managers, we track the health score of our clients and so on. But somehow the whole AI thing doesn't quite gel the things together. So let's try to unpack this today and see how we go with this between the product and the profit. So taking a step back, when the whole IT industry is about the land on the left side of the screen, which is on the old world of land renew. So we land a big deal with the client. When the client is ready to refresh the technology or change, or expand, we will then go in and talk to the client again. So how TSIA have actually moved that whole needle is whereby they created this model, which is the land, adopt, expand, renew model, which is the LAER model that Bill has spoken about earlier. So in this, that's the first time that we start talking about the adoption, and the expansion is then broken up into upselling and cross-selling to existing customer once they have nicely adopted the solution that you have sold them. So that is the model that today is quite familiar to a lot of the solution provider. A few years ago, about 4 to 5 years ago, TSIA added another dimension to this whole adopt and expand, which is the tool that you see below, which is the analyze and the place. So it adds A and the P in front of the LAER and pronounced as A player. So between the land, adopt, expand, and renew, now we are looking at how do we analyze all these clients' data and place the right data, the right resource to the right people at the right time so that they can then engage the client for the whole the adoption, the expansion, and the renewal. So he added that whole A and the P in this. So why am I talking about all of this? And that goes very well back into the pricing and how the pricing model have changed according to how the client wants to buy today. So this is on the left bottom corner. That's where we start with the classic starting point on how we used to price the licenses, whether is it a per user, whether is it per concurrent user, or even before that, a perpetual license or a per site license. So that's today, we start with that as a starting point. Of course, we can go back much longer than this, but if we take that as a starting point for the pricing, how it goes is that then when we had SaaS, we talk about their whole cost-based consumption pricing. So, the whole monthly consumption and how we talk about the cloud pricing, how you use it and so on. And along the way, we brought in this value-based pricing where it's no longer about just the cost. What is the value to the client? It might cost the vendor only $1 to serve this particular service or to provision for that service. But to the client, if there's the value is there, then we should price it according to the value that the client is enjoying. Okay. And that has been a nice idea, but the whole mechanics or the matrix around, then how do we price for value-based pricing? There's, in theory, that's there, but I don't see that a lot in the enterprise world that some of us have spent some time in. Then now comes the new way, which now the client is saying, wait, whether is it you're talking about agentic AI, whether you're talking about the new Gen AI model and so on, it is technology, but does it solve my problem? So then we talk about the outcome based. Now, the outcome based today is a little bit more matrix driven than the value based, because the client wants to quantify the outcome that you're getting, and the vendor, the client is getting, and the vendor has to deliver to that outcome to price that. And that becomes a whole new ballgame. A new conversation is no longer a product selling or a license selling model per se. So what this means is that the whole pricing changes means also the delivery is no longer putting a customer success manager to check in with the client, whether they are adopting and so on, but that whole pricing goes further up into that whole pre-sales model. And in fact, very soon, I think you will be, if you want, Salamander has come up with a fresh pricing white paper that we can talk about, as an offer to you, as a bonus for you to stay to the end of the webinar. And if we take this as an example, because, these are all theory, right? So if I take this as an example, of what really we are seeing in the corporate, in the IT vendor or the offering, let's take the example of Zoom. During the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, Zoom suddenly picked up. Okay, it wasn't the established players that we know of, the big players who already had have those conferencing solution that has taken off as much as Zoom. So there are a lot of combination of reason why Zoom has taken off a lot. But you would think that that was during the pandemic, where, whether you have a big church trying to deliver still the service and so on. But you would think that after the COVID, things will fall off because people go back to face-to-face, and, the Zoom will be affected. But no, today, in fact, even in today's webinar, we are still using Zoom. And there is a good reason for this, because how Zoom had sustained their growth wasn't just getting new clients who have not used conferencing before. So what they have done was a deep adoption across entire organization, whether it's a commercial organization, religious organization, or charity organization, and expand it beyond just meetings into webinars. They come up with solutions. It integrates into the phone system. So that creates that whole stickiness that sustains them through and past the whole pandemic. So now we have all this as a background. We're still talking about how do we move them from the product to pricing through this strong customer adoption, right? So questions that I get a lot of time is, we've got lovely enterprise technology companies who has very, very good, strong products, but not everybody can convert that into a consistent customer uptake at scale, like the Zoom example that I've given earlier on. The thing is that when we launch a big IT companies, let's say we launch a big product, we have got aggressive marketing. It is a very, very good product. We talk about the technology and so on, how good a technology in and how big a breakthrough it is. But on the buyer side, on the client side, it is not about just the technology. It's about whether can they absorb that technology into their workflow, because adoption is not really a product, or is it not a marketing thing? It's not just, I do a big marketing launch and so on. It is actually on the buyer side, it's behavioral, it's process, it's all the organizational challenge that come to it. And it is not just one product. They have got change fatigue because there's a lot of products coming in there. So say for I give you the similar example of teleconferencing. So Microsoft has got Microsoft Teams, and the licenses has been bundled into the enterprise licenses for a long time. And the uptake has been stagnant and for a long time, because it is not about, it is a point. Some clients use it as a point solution, meaning that I use it as a meetings and things like that, until the push for adoption, to build it into the whole workflow, into the integration with the Office suite, how they co-author, how they have the minutes convert into the meetings, and the meetings convert into the minutes, and so on. That whole stickiness, then exploded for Microsoft Teams. So it just showed that it's not about marketing dollar as well. It's not also not just about a good product. It is a good product. There were a lot of marketing investment into the marketing of Teams, but the real takeoff is not at that marketing investment. So we see that where there is a huge push in the change management and the adoption over there.
Theresa, can I just come in with a point here? And I don't want to dump on Microsoft, but I do remember a lot of conversations with very senior people in Seattle in Microsoft that were concerned about their adoption rates, just to sort of reinforce what you've just said. And their worry was if they didn't adopt the services that had been contracted into these enterprise licenses, they risked being displaced. And they weren't worried about being displaced by other vendors. They were worried about being displaced by tools that individuals might start to introduce to the workplace, such as WhatsApp. And then all of a sudden, these are proliferating through the organization and they've been displaced. So even the biggest software, or one of the biggest software companies in the world, was absolutely concerned about adoption rates. And yet when they look at their teams, people, not their product teams, but the teams of people inside the company, they were focusing a lot of their effort back then on landing new name accounts. They were not allocating resources to actually drive adoption in their existing accounts. So is this things that you've seen as well?
Absolutely. So I still remember the conversation. It wasn't too long ago, actually. The conversation was about let's incentivize the reseller, let's put in spiffs, incentivize the sales, and so on. But the whole crux of the matter was until the dollars went to help in developing kits, the change management or adoption kits that the client could take and go, or the reseller can take and implement for the client. That's where we really see that whole big uptick. And that's also technologically it's a strong product, but it also take away some of the simplicity that solutions that Zoom have, for example. To balance that, you have to have something in between, like the adoption or the more concerted effort of change management to balance that off in terms of simplicity versus the adoption. And that actually leads very nicely into the next question, which is, so you have bundled very cleverly the pricing, the bundle. You tell the client, it is there. You don't have to spend extra money to buy another conferencing solution. It is part of the package that you already have you have already paid for it. Let's put it this way. And what's holding the client back from fully realizing this value from this supposedly license that they already have? There's a few of every implementation is different, but there's some common points, and today I list 3 common points that I see in almost majority of the change management project that I've been involved in. Number 1 is the lack of the clear outcomes. So after you implement, you say, okay, it's almost like an IP phone where you say press 9 to dial up. But what does the success looks like? The whole clear outcome of the new way of working and why it is better. That whole outcome is not very clear. The users are told these are the training, face-to-face training, these are the training videos, and this is the help desk. But it doesn't come together in their whole workflow. It's not integrated into the workflow whereby, okay, naturally that whole in the morning when we start our computer, we automatically start our inbox. That is that whole behavioral, that whole natural workflow that works in there. So the gaps in the change management is that the new solution, even though the enterprise owns the license, but it's not into the daily routine or workflow of the user. And third is that it's a bit fragmented in terms of ownership. So for example, you've got an intranet, somebody is responsible for that SharePoint in there. You've got your email, system, archival system, somebody is responsible for that. You set up a team site that somebody is responsible for that. And then, whoever can start a new meeting, but who is doing the minutes and sharing it and things like that. So that is a very fragmented type of ownership in there. And couple that by itself, each of this is not a big showstopper, honestly. It can be resolved by itself. But when you have all this coming together, the factors all coming together from the lack of the clear outcome, the gaps in that whole change management, workflow, integrated workflow, and that fragmented ownership, it really slows down that whole adoption and holds the client back.
Theresa, I got another point here, if I may. The area that I believe, and I'm looking for your validation, is that one of the best things a company can do for clients is to make sure that they've got information flow through analytics or through whatever it may be to show the client what it is they're actually using. And the example you used earlier on enterprise licenses and so on, you need a PhD to understand those flippant things. They're so complicated. Most enterprises don't understand what they've actually signed up to consume. And this could be from lots of different companies. And it's the client success team, in my view, that goes into a client and actually shows them what they're using, what they're not using, what they're paying for, what they should be utilizing more, or take it out of the agreement. And that's the value add that the client success teams bring to a client, no?
It is, and to be fair, today the client success teams are doing it quite well in terms of showing the features and so on. But that whole integration into what the client's workflow, so I show you this feature, this particular feature in sales. I take an example of Salesforce. So it's one of the most powerful CRM platform or sales funnel type of platform. So you could show the features on, you can put in the leads here, you put your call reports here, you can run your reports here, you can see and tag and rank and know how you're gonna move that lead through the qualification into an opportunity and so on and convert, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is that until it's integrated into the sales motion of the sales team, that okay, I'm gonna use this during the sales meeting, sales manager uses this in the sales meeting, I'm reporting my funnel that way and things like that. Unless it's integrated into that process, that is still the customer success manager is only still at that feature level. Am I clear in showing that? Yep. Okay. So the key takeaway here is that the alignment of the two to the business process is important. Otherwise, that value will not be realized. I mean, it is a challenge to realize the value. Okay, so now we have covered both on the vendor side, and then we've covered the front, and then from the buyer's perspective, and then now we've done the sale. Okay, so to your point, the usage may remain a little low. So because you have tracked the health score, the CSM has done their job to keep tracking all the telemetry and so on to know that the usage is low. So how do then we move that whole? What does this create risk for the business? So you say it's a lagging indicator, it's a leading indicator. The fact is that the low usage itself, we know is a problem, but how big a problem it is. So everybody get very nervous when there's a low usage and go, okay, it is a problem. We got to get churn. I think this is given. Everybody knows that, you get low usage, you get churn. But it's not just about the churn and at what point, from a matrix point of view, at what point you do what kind of intervention. That's you say that okay, it's low. What is low, and is it low enough that we worry that it will be they are not going to renew, or it's low but they are still going to renew because it's relatively high compared to the rest of our client, for example. So where is that relativity? What is the action that we can take, or know what action to take for this? So I give an example, and again, it's IT vendor. So during the early growth of Slack. So at some point we say we do not need inbox anymore. Everybody can use Slack and so on. So the whole measurement wasn't about whether and everybody was using. So if you at a certain in some of the startups that we work with, everybody was using Slack. So you say, okay, we don't have an issue with the utilization. Usage is relatively high, but what is high? And tomorrow, will there be another Slack that comes in, and then the client switches because it's so easy to switch from Slack? It was easy to adopt Slack, but also as easy to switch as well. So what is the stickiness? And that's where the internal matrix of Slack was, that they need to look at teams that send about 2,000 messages within a given period of time. So that given period of time, the definition changes. So that whole threshold that's being set, once you hit a certain threshold, that stickiness is there. For example, if you go into WhatsApp today and half of your friends are not on WhatsApp, then that stickiness will not be there because that critical mass, that threshold hasn't been. So you say, okay, I have got 100 friends on WhatsApp, but maybe my contact list is 1,000. So 100 looks like a lot because I never have a chat group of 100 people, but it's not really a lot when that whole threshold in terms of that whole being able to use as a communication tool is there. Does that make sense?
And is it the client success or customer success team's job then to work with the client to drive those consumption numbers up in the sense of now moving to expansion? Is that the way it goes?
Yes, but before that, the knowing, the diagnostic of knowing what is high and what is low relative to the client way of working is important.
Which means you got to have the data in the first place.
Exactly. So that's where you bring in, say, you and I or some of our colleagues to then tailor and collect that data that is specific to that particular usage or that particular client. Because 2,000 could be suitable for Slack, but to, let's say, if you have an integrated email meeting solution, conferencing solution, 2,000 might not be the good enough number. So now we talk about the whole threshold and numbers, and we send the huge team of customer success managers to the client to push their adoption. And how do we then translate it into commercial value? We say that we do not want, none of us want a customer success team to become a cost. Then we say, so we want them to adopt so that renewal becomes a non-event. We want them to expand through upselling and cross-selling. So it's always easier to get a second dollar from the same customer. We know this. All of us know this. But the thing is, when we then measure the customer success, it should go a little bit beyond the whole, I would say, vanity matrix, like, login, activity, how many records have they used, how many calls have they made, and things like that. It should go beyond that whole, this type of basic 101 type of matrix. It should tie back into the outcome. So what does it mean when the client logs in every day? What does it mean for the client to log in every day? So from the whole product usage into the whole business outcome and then the commercial impact. So it's not about how often the platform is being used, but is this usage driving that whole efficiency, that revenue, that cost saving, reduction of risk or mitigation of risk that the client is looking for? I give another example. So Adobe Creative Cloud, which is an integrated suite of tools that you use to create. And for Adobe, the client success managers, instead of just tracking login, what it does is that it focuses on the workflow. For example, how often the user complete a creative project using multiple tools within that ecosystem. So it ties that usage directly to that productivity and then that whole retention, because it's the whole multiple into one project type of use. So it's not just about the login or usage or things like that. It is about the outcome for the user. Last questions that I frequently get as well is, what does it take for the client success to move beyond monitoring health score, which is most fundamental that all customer success managers would measure, and then become a true driver of that whole expansion and being able to measure that incremental revenue. So it's about the value creation, focusing on this whole, what I talked about just now, in the whole upsell, the cross-sell, and the whole outcome for client. When we do the adoption, for example, it's not just about the whether how many of this that they use, and also be able to prove back to the client that the usage has directly means a different way of doing things for them previously that is faster, better, or cheaper.
Theresa, a couple of things. Sorry, I'm just hesitating, thinking some of these things through. There's a number of companies that we've approached or they've approached us, and we talk about customer success, and they always say, yeah, we got that. And yeah, okay, please tell me about your customer success team. And customer success means a whole range of different things to different people. To me, it's all about this whole landing, adopting, expanding, renew life cycle, right? It's an infinity loop, or as Cisco Systems used to call it, a racetrack. It never ends your engagement with a client. And you referenced earlier about churn, where some telcos, twice in my career, my companies have been bought by telcos, and telcos accept churn. Churn is a part of their life where, we've got a contract churn, we've got price churn, we've got device churn, all these different churn metrics. And yet the SaaS companies treat churn as if it's the end of the world. At Salesforce.com, there was always this rumor that they used to hang black flags on the buildings in San Francisco if they ever lost a client. But the point being is, in the SaaS world, losing a client is a massive problem. They track metrics like lifetime value, customer acquisition cost, all these core metrics. And yet they don't accept churn where previous companies do. Now, the whole customer success world came out of these SaaS companies, right? And that's why they're so successful at it. And that's why other companies should really look at how these guys operate and understand that customer success is not just an interesting part of the cycle, it is the cycle with your client. It's a huge shift in mindset for companies. So, building up to a question, does the sales team do the customer success? Or is it a customer success team that does the customer success? Because often I see that companies say, yeah, we're doing this, and we've asked our sales guys to do the entire cycle. Well, most sales guys are hunters and they go and hunt for new deals. They neglect their clients, and therefore the customer success cycle never happens, or they get very comfortable with a couple of clients and never go hunting new logos. So is it separate teams?
Well, I've got two sets of answer. The one answer is the current or the old school that we come from, which is the still the software licenses, the SaaS and so on, where honestly it should be a different team. But the thing is that the second team, sometimes the matrix is so, like what I was talking about just now, is so fundamental that tracking about usage, lock-ins and so on, that we are not really pushing the whole limit of the whole customer success. But I could spend some time talking about this whole model and the last 10 years, why there's good examples and bad examples. The issue right now also is that the whole agentic AI coming into place and totally change what I talked about in the beginning, that whole outcome-based type of pricing. It totally changed that whole definition of customer success right now. So in the over example, we have got the sales, which land the deal, and then the customer success try to prolong or extend the adoption, and then also expand the revenue with upsell, cross-sell, and so on. And that is the two teams that we're talking about. In the new AI service world, if you're providing any service around that whole AI, it's no longer two teams. It's actually a little bit more complicated than that, because there's new capabilities that the company or the vendor needs to offer to be able to price profitably for a outcome-based type of pricing, be able to track and take action if it's not going the way that they have committed, or that was going to reward them for, because the reward is no longer about selling the biggest deal or selling the most number of users anymore. The reward comes in when the client achieve a certain outcome. So if it's not going that way, you need to know your signals much earlier and be able to step in and change that, because that affects that bottom line straight away, the amount of billable that you can bill the client. And if it's going well, how do you then expand and push new use cases per se outside of that? So that leads me nicely into the next slide, where we talk about now service organizations must build new capability. So first, you talk about the AI readiness and governance. Those days, we actually, at least when I first started working, we used to have to sign an acceptable use of internet and computer as an employee. Later on, we have got acceptable use of BYOB, acceptable use of push mail, and so on. And now the new, when you're introducing AI into this, is about the readiness, is about the acceptable use of AI from an employee point of view, because now the employee have got a lot more endpoints, and then preparing your client or customers' data, the system, your infrastructure, and all the whole risk framework has to be relooked at for the client in this case. So this support that whole success of the client to be able to reach the outcome that you have based your pricing on. So you need all these support pieces to do that. So it's no longer a sales team nor a customer success team only. So it works together with the two team. And for the customer success team, that whole value optimization services about what they have been told previously, but now it affects directly the pricing. It's about the expanding the use cases and ensuring that whatever is that you have done, that the client has done in an AI, say in a sandbox environment, the whole value actually increases as the agent is being trained or as the more data sets comes in and so on. It actually increases so that there is that whole continuous value optimization for every token or every dollar that they have spent on AI. Then your supporting structure, where now once you have had that all these two services with your sales, with your client success, you can then confidently structure an engagement where you own that whole outcome, because you know where you're going to get outcome, you know where within a certain range that your outcome will differ, and therefore your price or your profitability or your billable differs within a certain range that you can forecast per se. So that's it took a long time to answer the question, but it's no longer just sales, it's no longer just customer success, but all these support pieces that goes around it as a product or service offering that goes around it.
Right.
So we will be opening the floor in a while, but with this, you can see that the whole pricing, that whole structure, to the organization structure to support the matrix, the measurement, the KPI for every one of the roles that are involved in this whole cycle has all have to be looked at. And as I say, every of this organization is different. In fact, even the threshold is different. The whole where the needle move is actually different as well. So where we will, if you like, we have got Salamander have got white papers that we will be publishing and make available to you. So you just request after this webinar, or we have got client success assessment that we look into various of these dimensions. And again, have a conversation with us. This is offered as a complimentary service as well for our client, where you at the end what you will get is you will then get a client success readiness in terms of a radar map on where you can choose and pick the development of your abilities.